Hello all, I'm the Mad Pastor, and this week we're going to do something a little different. We're going to take a break from our Advent stuff. I'll get back to that next week. But I wanted to update you on what's going on in Israel and Hamas and a theological response to that. And to help me with that, I have invited my friend and church member, Ryan Gandour, who he grew up in Lebanon and is very familiar with that region and the dynamics going on there, and is also very well informed, not only from the news, but literally from friends and family and people who are in that region and in that area. So what this is a discussion about that. We try to stay away from news reporting, although there's some of that here, so please fact check us. We're open to disagreement. But also a theological response. What does the Torah say? What does the Bible say about what is going on in Gaza right now? So I hope that this is helpful.
Hello all, welcome to a special crossover episode of the Kindred UMC live show and my other channel, The Mad Pastor. We are taking a break from Advent. We are going to be talking about the latest developments in the Israel, Gaza, Hamas, Palestinian conflict. Those all mean different things, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But there's been recent developments. There was a ceasefire. That ceasefire is now over, and we wanted to talk about it. And so I'm Chris. I'm the pastor of Kindred UMC, and I'm also the Mad Pastor. And I've invited Ryan, who actually grew up in that area. We already did another video. You can go check that one out when the conflict first started. And now we wanted to do a follow-up one. So even though I introduced you, will you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hey, everybody. Like Chris said, we did our part one. I believe it was like maybe a few weeks after the October 7th
I don't think it was
incident.
that late. I think it was the week. It was pretty close.
Yeah, possibly. My name is Ryan Gondor. I lived in Lebanon. I am half Lebanese. I'm also half American. Lived most of my life in the Middle East, actually 23 years of my life. And from that, I've gained a lot of knowledge and experience and everything that goes down over there. And I can give some first-hand accords of what's going on and talk a little bit about some of the challenges that people are facing in that region. And we're definitely going to be, this is not a one-sided conversation. We're going to talk about all the facts, put everything on the table. And
as best we can.
As best we can, because, we're not politicians.
Yeah, we don't. So here's the one thing I will say as a caveat up front. Don't trust us on the news reporting facts. I'm not being flippant about it. I'm doing my best to stay informed. So is Ryan. In fact, we literally just discussed something where we both learned something new about things that we hadn't read yet. Mm-hmm. So don't quote me. I'm not a news reporter, but I am a pastor. And so the conversation is going to be framed in there. We have to introduce facts because there are actual things that are occurring and actual lives are being lost. There's real blood on the ground kind of stuff here. So we have to talk about facts as best we can. But the real thing I want to frame this conversation in is a theological and moral and ethical conversation. What should we as Judeo-Christian people, I'm a pastor for a church, so obviously a follower of Jesus, but definitely Jesus was a rabbi. So I have a lot of following in the Hebrew religion, the Hebrew faith. And so the question becomes, what is a Christian or a Jew's moral, theological, God-following response to what is happening? And so that's what we're going to talk about. And to start that, I want to just read from, this is from Exodus, and it's going to sound a little weird and legalistic at first, but stick with me and I'll explain kind of what's going on here. Okay, so this is from the book of Exodus, chapter 21, verses 18 through 27, I think. So when individuals quarrel and one strikes the other with a stone or a fist so that the injured party, though not dead, is confined to bed, but recovers and walks around outside with the help of a staff, then the assailant shall be free of liability except to pay for the loss of time and to arrange for full recovery. This is in a long series of lines about the law of laws, lines of laws. And so I'm going to keep going, but just to sum up, what I read was if somebody gets injured, then the assailant is responsible for recouping the losses due to that injury and nothing more is the emphasis here. Verse 20, when a slave owner strikes a male and female slave, I know it's unkempt, but like they had slavery and there's laws around it. When they strike a male or female slave with a rod and the slave dies immediately, the owner shall be punished. So you're not allowed to kill your slaves. But if the slave survives a day or two, there is no punishment, for the slave is the owner's property. Now that's like horrible because we know better now. But in a culture of slavery, they're saying if you kill your slave, you're going to be held responsible for that. But if you're just punishing, disciplining your slave, then that's fine. So there's a trend here that I hope you'll notice. 22. When people who are fighting injure a pregnant woman so that there is a miscarriage, and yet no further harm follows, the one responsible shall be fined what the woman's husband demands, paying as much as the judges determine. If any harm follows, then you shall give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. So you may have heard this language before, eye for an eye, tooth for tooth. This is just one of the many, many, many times it comes up in the Bible, and especially in the Torah. Every time it comes up, it sounds gruesome. Mm-hmm. It's this eye for an eye, and later Jesus does speak on it and speaks to that's not what it's about. But it's important to understand that these laws are about fairness. They're about, you can hear it, if you get past the gruesomeness of it, you can hear it and it's eye for eye. It's not eye for now I burn your house down and I kill your family. Mm-hmm. It's tooth for tooth. It's not you knocked out my tooth and now I'm going to cut your legs off. Mm-hmm. And that is the running through line of the Old Testament laws. Now they're ancient and they're out of date, and that's why they get continually progressive as you continue to read the Bible. By the way, like Leviticus and Deuteronomy take these laws and they take them even further in ways that are actually more egalitarian and more helpful, and they start freeing slaves, and they start saying that you can't be held in debt indefinitely, and they start to really become more egalitarian, and that is what's going on. But the first and foremost thing is you're not allowed to visit horrific, heinous punishment against another person if they stole your dog or something.
Very true, and we obviously want to start this off by condemning the abhorrent attacks on October 7th. And we also want to condemn the abhorrent attacks on innocent civilians
that followed
inside Gaza and that are following. One thing I will say is that since the beginning of this, myself and Chris, have been following the events that are going on, but we've always tried to maintain a very level-headed approach and response to the things that are going on. Now we're 2 months in, and the civilian deaths are just mounting on one side, and they continue to mount on one side. And I believe, from certain sources, it depends on what you're looking at. There's various sources out there. Over 20,000 people have been killed. Some of the sources online are saying, and this is quotes from Israeli officials, they believe that for every 2 civilians that they kill one Hamas member.
Yeah, I want to pause there because that's an important stat. The Israeli military, which has every reason to tout its own effectiveness at going after Hamas terrorists, the Israeli military has said out loud in the public to the press, we estimate 2 civilians for every 1 militant, and we're happy about that ratio, effectively. So one of the things that one of the reasons I really wanted to have this conversation is because as I've talked with other folks who are, even folks who disagree with me on my stance against Israel's actions recently, and honestly in the past as well, and their treatment with the West Bank and Gaza.
And let's pause there too. I'm going to let you finish that. You can condemn Israel. It's okay to condemn Israel for wrongdoing. It does not mean you're anti-Semitic. And I said this, I believe, in the previous video. To remember, Arabs are Semites. So it's not being anti-Semitic if you're condemning a government. It's not even
being anti-Jew.
Yeah, and if you're condemning a government for a disproportionate response, it is not. I just want to stop there.
Well, and it's what we said in the first video. Anytime a nation state uses its immense disproportionate power to visit disproportionate violence against another people group, when Israel does it, when Russia does it, and when the United States does it, when any group that has a wild power discrepancy uses that to visit violence against civilians, it is evil. It is evil.
And as Christians, it's incumbent upon us to call out that evil, no matter who's perpetrating it.
It's also anti-Jewish. It is anti the Torah to do so. So, all right. So back to what I was saying. One of the things that I've heard when I talk with people who disagree with me about my willingness to condemn the actions of the Israeli government and the IDF, one of the things that I hear is, don't they have a right to defend themselves? And I absolutely agree with that. Of course, every nation state, I think every human being, I think it's a human right to have the right to defend yourself against violence. If a violent person broke into this door, I would use all the means I have to defend myself, my guest, my wife, my dog even. I believe that is a basic human right, that you have the right to defend yourself and even defend your home, from intrusion. But I do not have the right to, once I defeat that criminal, to go to his home, to lock his children in a room, to burn down his house, to find out where his parents live and go kill them as well. It's the disproportionality that is anti-Bible. It is anti-Torah to say that if you come into my home, then I can defend myself by killing your entire family. And that is not eye for eye. That is not tooth for tooth.
Yeah, and in our first video, you can watch that back. We talked a little bit about the history of the events that are happening in the Middle East. I believe from the 20s all the way up to current events that are going on right now. One thing to keep in mind is, for this video, we're going to stick with, post October the 7th, but I do want to say something. When you disenfranchise a people, when you oppress a people, when you put people in conditions that are unlivable by most organizations calling the situation in Gaza, even pre-October 7th, essentially a large open air prison. It's very difficult.
It was Amnesty International.
Mm-hmm. And
Amnesty International called it an apartheid.
Mm-hmm. So it's very difficult to come at this and say that everything started on October the 7th. Now, what happened was horrible. The response to what happened thus far has been extremely disproportionate, to the extent where you have, by most numbers, over 5,000 children dead, and you still have many, many people that are missing under the rubble. You also have calls for evacuations, which is when we were talking our first video, they were mentioning they wanted 1.1 million Palestinians to evacuate from the north of Gaza, primarily in the Jabalia refugee camp, all the way to the south of Gaza. Now, they evacuated, a lot of them did evacuate the Khan Yunis in the south of Gaza. during their
on
evacuation on foot or on donkeys, or you know,
Yeah.
because it's very difficult to drive through streets that have been bombed out. But as they were evacuating, and this is documented by major news sources, you know, we are very level-headed. We're taking a very level-headed approach to this. So you can look at all the news sources. While they were evacuating, they were unfortunately bombed, many of the civilians. Now that they're in the south of Gaza, in Khan Yunis, they're being told to leave Khan Yunis and go to El Mawali, which is a coastal little strip of land that's barren. It's basically a desert. It's about 5.5 miles long, and they're asking 500,000 Palestinians to evacuate to a strip of land that's 5.5 miles long. So let's stop there. I guess.
Well, the numbers. This is a couple weeks old. It's from Breaking Points, but the numbers that I heard as far as and things have changed since then now. So like I imagine it's worse, because I know I've heard bombing has increased in the south now. But weeks ago it was like 60-40. So like if you were in the north, you had 60% chance of death by bomb. If you were in the south, you had 40. Like, so it wasn't better significantly. You know, like, so the south, you weren't necessarily safe. And then one of the other things that we just looked up was, given the history of Egypt used to occupy Palestine, or the Gaza Strip
From 48 to 70.
Yeah, it was like post World War
Something
II.
like that, yeah.
And so there's actually and this is not true of all, this is a broad stroke thing, but politically speaking, Egypt doesn't have a vested interest. Also, one of the things you brought up was their economic situation.
Yeah, voting's open in Egypt until Tuesday. So if you're Egyptian, go out there and vote. But
so
we all know who's going to win that election.
Yeah, so there's no real political help to receive refugees in the south, because the only way out, and if you don't have ships, which they don't, there's no Palestinian navy.
There's no navy, there's no air force, there's nothing. Armament for tanks.
So the only way out is through Egypt, and Egyptians have absolutely no interest in receiving millions of refugees, and especially given their history, like, they don't want anything to do with Gaza. They don't want anything to do with that Palestinian population.
And you know what's interesting? Chris and I were talking about this, and he actually educated me a little bit on this from somebody that he follows.
Peter Zion is the guy.
One thing I will say is that Egypt does not want the influx of Palestinians, but also the Palestinians of Gaza do not want to evacuate, leave their homes, their history, everywhere, you know, everything that they've established, just leave that all behind and move to another area. These people have been pushed out for over 70 years, going from point A to point B to point C to point Z. They do not want to be pushed out again. And I believe a lot of them are at a point where they're like, if my options are flee again or die, then I'm just going to pray that this war finds a ceasefire here soon, a permanent ceasefire, and I can make it out alive, or unfortunately I'm going to perish. And that's the sad reality for many Palestinians.
Now, I want to, because I can hear the other argument from people who are pro-Israel in this particular conflict. I can hear the other side of the argument. You just described the history of the Israelite people wandering from one place to another, and like the vulnerability that you have as a nation group without a homeland and without a strategic alliances and without the ability to defend yourself. So I hear that, and I agree with the underlying sentiment, which is, yes, not having a homeland makes you vulnerable. Here's where the problem lies. The Israelite nation was established by God to be a city on a hill, to be an example of what it means to be a country that follows the ways of Yahweh. And the ways of Yahweh do not allow for a superior military force to go in and kill women and children indiscriminately. And
with no end in sight.
And in order to justify, from a theological standpoint, in order to justify what is going on in Israel, you will have to look at all of the Palestinian civilian civilization as baby rapers and murderers and people who sacrifice children to pagan gods. Like, to make the biblical argument, you will have to essentially lie about the vast majority of the civilian population that lives in that area. Certainly we can claim that about Hamas. You're absolutely right. Hamas can go die in a ditch as far as I'm concerned. They're evil human trash, and I would like to see a holy war against Hamas. I'm not willing to shoot through 2 civilians to kill a Hamas militant. I'm not willing to kill 2 kids for every fighter. I'm not. And anyone who is, I may not be a historian, an expert in that. I may not be an expert journalist, but I am a accredited, qualified expert in theology and morality and the Bible. And I can say with all of the power that God gives me, it is evil to kill civilians intentionally in order to try and wreak vengeance against militants and terrorists.
I've lived Israeli occupation. I am from the south of Lebanon. I've lived it. I've experienced the death, carnage, and destruction that they can essentially take out on an entire population. And it's not something to be cheerful for. I think the main idea of what Chris and I are trying to say is that the loss of any human life, whether that human life is a Palestinian or an Israeli or anyone on this planet, should be condemned. The loss of an innocent human being
let's add caveats.
Be condemned. Yeah,
innocent
100%.
civilians.
I think, for the most part.
I understand why a nation would go after terrorists and people who literally want to destroy them as a people group. That's completely, I understand that.
But here's the thing.
That's not what's happening right now.
There's no Hamas in the West Bank. During the almost 10-day truce or ceasefire between Israel and Gaza, they released, I believe, 10 Israeli captives, and Israel would release around 20 to 30 imprisoned Palestinian captive who, if you look at the actual population,
I think they released, there were several batches. Yeah.
So if you look at the amount of captives that are in Israeli prisons, I believe almost 40% are under the age of 20, right? There are children that are about 9 years old that were sentenced to over 25 years in prison because they threw rocks at tanks. These are all facts. You can look these up. If you disagree with me, please feel free to look them up. The idea is this. When you do the prisoner swap that they did, and they had that truce for almost 10 days, in the West Bank, Palestinians were getting arrested at a rate of 50 to 100 a day. So for every Palestinian that they were releasing back to Gaza, they were recouping that in the West Bank. And these are people who are imprisoned for lengthy terms without any judicial oversight. So they go to jail and they just basically sit in county for 10 years until they figure out what they're going to do with them. So these are all factoids you have to think of. And, one person said it best. When you go into a population and you kill innocent men, women, and children, because a lot of times the narration is always, women and children, absolutely, but men, women, and children.
When you non-combatant men, too.
Non-combatant men. When you kill them and they lose their entire family, you're essentially creating you're creating a new Hamas fighter, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, not only is it abhorrent morally, but it's also a horrible strategy that guarantees the fighting and the killing will continue for several more generations.
And on top of that, one thing to remember is this war is not going to end. And unless the world stops it, unless we come out and we actually have a divisive plan on what's going on. Hamas is a guerrilla force. They don't fight out in the open. They're underground most of the times. We saw what happened in Vietnam.
Look at Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Look at Vietnam.
We saw what happened there. This is not going to end well, and it's going to end with the death and destruction of Gaza.
Even the French resistance in Germany.
Yeah.
Like you can't fight a population.
No, you can't. And we can't claim to be the upholders of morality here in the United States if we sit back and just let this continue without any oversight. There's innocent people dying every day as we sit and speak. There's innocent babies that are being killed before even having an opportunity to enjoy the fruits of this world. They're dying. There's babies dying in incubators.
There's some graphic stuff about
I just plead
bombings of like apartment complexes and hospitals, and if you have the stones to take a look at it, it will change your mind about what's like. We live in it's across the world for sure. It's like all the way across there. I'll never meet those. Like, I understand.
Well, a lot of people don't realize.
Isn't the call of our faith to see them as our brothers and sisters?
Well, also, you do have to remember, a lot of people do not understand the war that's happening in the Middle East. They have these broad generalizations of what they just hang on to. And you can't change their mind for any... There's no way you can change their mind because they've been brought up with this, and they don't want to learn about another side because the side that they know is the side that they know, and they're going to stick with it. But I plead with everybody, look at the images that are out online. It's 2023. Everything you do, if you try and stage fake videos to push propaganda for both sides, someone's going to find out. And you can't just say, oh, I can't believe anything, but then come at me with facts that you received from a specific news broadcasting agency. It doesn't work that way. You cannot do that. Have a level head, an open mind, and actually look into some of the facts.
Spread it around.
Yeah. Do not listen. This is one thing. The death of innocent civilians is wrong. That's it. Let's just stop there.
Yeah, full stop.
Let's just stop there and come to an agreement on that. The death of innocent civilians is wrong.
Yeah, no matter who does it.
Exactly.
No matter who does it.
There's over 30,000 Hamas fighters in Gaza. So if the Israeli military official said that they killed 2 civilians for every 1 Hamas fighter, and there's over 30,000 Hamas fighters, this war is nowhere from over. Yeah. And there's going to be a lot more dead civilians, unfortunately.
I would go even further. So the death, I understand that there's realities for collateral damage in conflicts, and it is incumbent on all of us to pressure our governments to reduce collateral damage as much as humanly possible. So I'm going to go even further. The intentional killing of civilians is particularly abhorrent and evil and a war crime. And we know for facts from the Israeli military, they're talking to the press about their intentional killing of civilians.
Also, people that were very well versed on the Ukraine-Russia conflict when that happened a few years back. You remember, lots of people that they read one article and all of a sudden they became experts into the geopolitics of that region.
I won't give them too much crap because I'm not. Yeah. I'm not an expert either.
But here's the thing: everybody was a huge advocate for the Ukrainians because obviously what happened to them is horrible, right? The war waged on them by Russia. But here's the thing: more civilians have been killed in the span of 2 months in Gaza than have been killed in the entire war with Russia and the Ukraine-Russia conflict. So put that in perspective. More bombs have been dropped on Gaza in 2 months than the U.S. dropped on Afghanistan in almost 2 years. So, and these are all factoids you can look up. And if it's not true, please comment in the comment section of this video. And if you do comment, please provide a link to something that's substantial, like an actual news source, not joe.com.
Yeah, open to disagreement from reliable sources. And I don't, when I say reliable sources, I don't, I'm not talking about like, oh, I disagree with CNN or whatever, or Fox News. I'll accept, articles, but not credible, mainstream. We understand that they have some actual people that they're reporting to and are being reported at,
Also, one thing to remember is that we all want peace. We want most people want a two-state solution. They want the Palestinians and the Israelis to have their own state. But here's the thing. You cannot have a two-state solution when essentially the land you're trying to make a two-state solution in has been chopped up like Swiss cheese. When there's border walls that are cut through Palestinian territory, when there's illegal settlements. These settlements are illegal. Everybody has said they're illegal, from Joe Biden to Obama. So when you have these illegal settlements cutting up towns like Swiss cheese, and then you say, well, we want peace, how is that possible? There's no possibility there. And what's happening right now, what the war that Israel is waging on Gaza right now, in the pretense of taking out Hamas, they are effectively bolstering that ideology by killing innocent civilians, and they're effectively creating a larger presence for Hamas and influence for Hamas around the world.
They're guaranteeing that future generations will continue this war. This is not a peaceful solution. It's vengeance, as best I can tell. It's not justice, and it's certainly not justice according to the Torah. It's not Jewish. It is specifically politically Israeli revenge.
And also, if you're still listening to us, it's obvious. That obviously means that you're interested in what we have to say. And like I said in the first video, we would welcome anybody to come and sit down with us and have an open discussion about everything that's going on. And just keep in mind that innocent people are dying every day. As we're sitting right here and talking and having this conversation, innocent people are dying. I support a ceasefire, and I would implore anyone to look into the facts and tell me if you do not support a ceasefire. We need a ceasefire now. I support that. I'm speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for the church in any way, but I'm speaking for myself. I do support a ceasefire because the indiscriminate bombing and killing of innocent civilians must stop. It must.
Yeah.
Also, the release of all captives.
Yeah, release of captives. The indiscriminate killing of civilians is abhorrent on either side, on every side, because there's multiple sides now. And I wish I had stronger steps, but honestly, a first step might be just opening yourself to being willing to say what Israel is doing is bad, just like what Hamas is doing is bad. That might be enough of a first step to actually make some changes. So, any last words?
No. If you know of any local agencies or foundations that you want to donate to provide, meals to the and mind you, when I keep mentioning Palestinians, and I know some of the people that disagree
Red Crescent is active in Gaza, I believe, which is like the Islamic version of the Red Cross, essentially.
And I know the people that disagree with us have already stopped watching, but if by any chance that you're still watching, I do ask you to just keep a level head, look at some of the facts behind everything that you're listening to, and vet everything you're listening to.
Yeah, vet.
Please vet everything you're listening to. And just think about this as human beings are dying for no reason right now.
Yeah, ideological.
This is a geopolitical
people are being
conflict.
killed over ideas.
This is a geopolitical conflict, and children that have just been brought in this world should not have to leave it immediately because of geopolitics and what's going on. And I think as Christians we can all support that, and I think we can all support the fact that we don't want to see an innocent person die. So.
Yeah. Amen. All right. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give all of us, especially in Israel and Gaza and the West Bank, peace. Amen.
Amen. I think that went good, but I don't know.